My name's Derek, I'm 31, and a year ago, I caught my younger brother in bed with my fiancée. That moment split my life in two, before and after. It was one of those scenes you think only happens in bad movies or internet horror stories. I wish it had been fake. I wish I hadn't walked into my own apartment a day early, flowers in hand, ready to surprise my fiancée Hannah after a business trip, only to hear her giggle from the bedroom, followed by my brother's voice. Familiar, casual, carefree, like he belonged there. I don't remember dropping the flowers, but I remember the silence after they landed. The stunned look on their faces, like I was the one who had broken into their world. Like I was the one intruding. My brother, Jake, jumped up, tripping over the sheets like some idiotic deer in headlights, mumbling something about how it just happened. Hannah didn't even try to explain. She sat there on the bed, wrapped in my sheets, staring at the floor like it would swallow her. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a punch. I just walked out. That silence stuck with me for weeks, like a ghost that wouldn't shut up. Jake is 28. The golden child, as my parents still call him, though never to my face. He's always been that guy. The charming screw-up who could crash his car and somehow make the cop apologize. He's got that kind of energy, you know? People mistake charisma for character. My parents did. So did Hannah, apparently. And me? I was the responsible one. The boring one. The planner. I put in the hours, kept the peace, held the flashlight while Dad worked under the car, paid for Jake's messes more times than I can count. But after that day, I cut them both out. Jake. Hannah. Cold turkey. I ghosted every call, deleted every text. My parents tried reaching out, of course. At first, it was soft, concerned. Then it turned into guilt-tripping. My mom said things like, families survive worse. My dad tried logic. You and Hannah weren't married yet. It's not like he ruined a marriage. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own blood trying to sweep this betrayal under the rug like it was some college prank. It confirmed what I'd always suspected deep down. That Jake could do no wrong in their eyes. Not even this. The weeks after the breakup were a blur. I moved out of the city, took a remote project with my firm, and rented a cabin upstate. I spent that fall chopping wood, cooking for one, and learning how loud a silent room can be. It sounds cliché, but that isolation healed something in me. I got therapy. I started journaling. I even learned to make a decent chicken marsala. And slowly, I stopped hearing their voices in my head. I started living again. Then came Claire. We met the following spring, completely by accident, if you believe in that sort of thing. I'd driven into town for groceries, and the bakery had a sign advertising almond croissants, my one weakness. She was behind the counter, flour on her cheek, tying up a box with twine like she was wrapping up happiness itself. We talked, laughed. I came back the next day, then the next. Before long, I wasn't just getting croissants, I was getting Claire. She wasn't like Hannah. Claire had this calm warmth to her, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. She asked about my day and actually listened. She didn't mind silence. She filled it with comfort, not noise. And unlike Hannah, she had no idea about my family drama, at least not at first. I didn't want to burden her with it, but after 6 months, it all came out over wine and a thunderstorm. She didn't pity me. She didn't rush to offer advice. She just held my hand, like she knew exactly how much it had cost me to say it out loud. That was the night I knew I'd marry her. We got engaged in the fall. A small picnic by the lake. No Instagram. No fireworks. Just the two of us, the leaves, and a ring I'd spent 6 months saving for. Claire cried when she saw it. Not because it was big. It wasn't. But because I told her what it meant. A new start. A vow to never repeat the past. A promise she could trust. Word traveled fast. I hadn't spoken to my parents in over a year, but somehow they found out, probably through some extended cousin who still stalked my Facebook. The next week, I got a voicemail from Mom. Then another. Then a long, drawn-out email titled Olive Branch. I didn't open it for days. When I finally did, it was exactly what I expected. Paragraphs of carefully worded, guilt-laced manipulation. Phrases like, "We're still your parents," and "Family is all we have in the end." And the kicker, "Jake is truly sorry." I deleted it. Then I got the text from Dad. "We want to help pay for the wedding." At first, I laughed. Out loud. In the middle of Claire's apartment. The same people who had defended Jake now wanted to pitch in like nothing had happened. Claire saw my reaction and asked what was up. I told her. She raised her eyebrows and just said, "That's unexpected. She never told me what to do. That's what I appreciated about her. But I could see the unspoken thought in her eyes. Are you really going to let them back in? And that's when the old knot in my chest came back. Not because I wanted their money. I didn't. Claire and I were planning a small wedding. But the idea of seeing Jake again, standing there with his smug smile and easy apologies, pretending he hadn't set fire to my life, that churned something in me. I wasn't ready to forgive. I wasn't even ready to forget. Still, something in that offer felt strategic. Like a test. They weren't just offering money. They were offering strings. Conditions. The illusion of reconciliation wrapped in dollar signs. I could smell the setup from a mile away. And then came the final ask. If we pay for the wedding, will you invite your brother? It was my mom's voice on speaker. I hadn't answered their calls in months, but Claire convinced me to take just one for closure. Instead, I got ambushed. To heal the family, Mom said. That's all we want, Derek. For this family to be whole again. I stared at Claire across the kitchen table, her hands still in mine, her eyes calm but wary. And that's when an idea started forming. A very different kind of idea. Not forgiveness. Not closure. Something else entirely. Something Jake would never see coming. And that's when things really began. I wish I could say I hung up right then and there. That I told my parents where they could shove their healing and walked away with my dignity intact. But that's not what happened. Instead, I sat there, phone still on speaker, my mother's voice filling the room like the static of a broken radio. Claire said nothing, just watched me closely, her thumb brushing slow circles into my hand. That was her way of grounding me. And in that moment, I needed it more than I realized. Jake has changed, my mom went on, like she was reading from some internal PR script. He's in therapy now. He's trying so hard to make things right. He regrets everything. My father chimed in next, tone clipped and rehearsed. We're not asking you to be best friends again. Just invite him. Let him be there for your big day. There it was. The real ask. I could feel the bait hanging in the air, like a trap that had been set a long time ago. I imagined them rehearsing this call over dinner, probably the same dinner Jake was sitting at, smirking across the table, certain that his charm would win again. My stomach turned. I'll think about it, I said. Not because I wanted to. Not because I forgave them. But because something in me stirred, something deeper than anger. A stillness. A clarity. After the call ended, I sat in silence for a while. Claire broke it first. You're not seriously considering inviting him, are you? No, I said. Then paused. But I might let him think I am. Claire tilted her head. That sounds dangerous. I know, I said. But so is letting him think he got away with it. That night, I didn't sleep much. My mind wandered back to all the moments Jake had stepped on me and walked away untouched. The time he borrowed my car and returned it with a busted side mirror, claiming it was like that when he got it. The time he faked a college internship and let our parents believe he was working at some fancy firm while I pulled double shifts to cover rent. They always defended him, always smoothed it over. He was going through something. He was finding himself. And I was the one expected to suck it up and keep the peace. It wasn't just the betrayal with Hannah. It was the years before that, the quiet erosion of boundaries, the unspoken expectation that my life should bend to accommodate his. And for the first time, I wasn't angry. I was done. The next few weeks were strangely quiet. I didn't respond to my parents' follow-up texts. I didn't take Jake's bait when he messaged me on Instagram with a casual, "Heard you're getting married. Man, congrats." Like we were just long-lost buddies catching up. I ignored it. Instead, I focused on the wedding. Claire and I had decided on a vineyard 2 towns over. A simple outdoor ceremony, nothing flashy. We picked wildflowers from the field behind her bakery, and her best friend Ellie helped design the invitations. It was ours entirely. No hotels, no ballrooms, just good people, good food, and one day that wasn't soaked in family drama. Or so I thought. 3 weeks before the wedding, I got a call from my cousin Matt. We hadn't spoken much lately, but he was one of the few relatives I actually respected, laid back, observant, and not one to buy into family politics. Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up, he said. I ran into Jake at Uncle Ray's thing last night. I braced myself. Yeah. He's telling everyone he's gonna be your best man. I blinked. What? Swear to God. Said you guys had this emotional reunion. Said you forgave him. Even said he helped plan the proposal. I sat back, heart pounding. He's lying. I figured, Matt said. Just thought you should know. Your mom was eating it up, too, acting like this whole thing is some rom-com ending. That was the moment the air changed. I could feel it in my bones, the way a dog senses a storm. This wasn't just about forgiveness anymore. Jake wasn't looking for peace. He was rewriting the story, turning himself into the misunderstood hero who won back his brother's love through tears and therapy. And our parents? They were helping him do it. I didn't sleep that night either. A few days later, I caved and called my mom. I wanted to hear it from her directly. Maybe part of me still hoped Matt had exaggerated. Maybe part of me still wanted to be wrong. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice level. Did you tell people Jake's going to be my best man? There was a pause. Then, in the most delicate tone she could muster, sweetheart, it just made things easier. People were asking. Easier for who? For the family, she said quickly. You don't understand the tension this has caused. Your aunts, your uncles, they've had to take sides. It's been exhausting. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So instead of telling the truth, you made up a story. I was protecting you, she said, like that was some kind of moral high ground. No, I said coldly. You were protecting Jake. There was a longer pause this time, the kind that swells with everything unsaid. You always think the worst of him, she finally said. But he's not the monster you've built up in your head. He slept with my fiancée, I said, while we were still engaged, while we were planning our wedding. And he's apologized for that, she snapped, suddenly defensive. He's doing the work. He's trying to heal. What about me? I asked, voice trembling now. Who's trying to heal me? Silence. That was my breaking point. I hung up. I didn't cry. Not then. I walked out onto the porch, let the night air hit my face, and just stood there until Claire came out and wrapped her arms around me. I didn't need words. I just needed that. Her. I wish I could say things settled after that. That my silence made them back off. But it didn't. A week before the wedding, Claire's friend Ellie came to us, eyes wide. You're not going to believe this, she said. Jake reached out to me. Claire and I exchanged a look. He what? He said he's planning a surprise toast at the reception. Said you gave him your blessing. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. He sent me this too, she added, pulling out her phone. There it was. A photo of Jake in a tux, holding a glass of champagne, captioned, for my brother and his beautiful bride. Better late than never, huh? Claire stared at the screen, then at me. Derek. I clenched my jaw. He's not just crashing the wedding. He's making himself the main character. Ellie bit her lip. I wasn't sure if it was a prank or... It's not, I said. It's Jake. And that's when the final pieces clicked into place. He wasn't just coming to the wedding to heal the family. He was coming to hijack it. To turn our day into his redemption arc. To walk into that vineyard like the prodigal son, charming the crowd, maybe even dropping a few tears to seal the performance. And I knew, in that moment, I couldn't just let it happen. Because there was one more thing Jake didn't know. One final twist he hadn't accounted for. He didn't know who Claire really was, or what she used to mean to him. Because once upon a time, long before me, back when Claire and Jake were in college together, she was the one girl Jake had wanted. The one girl he couldn't charm. The one girl who saw through him. She'd never told me much about it. Just that he'd asked her out once, and she'd said no. Politely. Then again, and again, until it got weird. Until he started showing up at the bakery when she was working, leaving notes, making jokes that didn't feel like jokes. Claire had brushed it off at the time. But now, he was about to see her walk down the aisle, wearing white, on my arm. And the best part? He didn't even know it yet. But he would. And when he did, everything would fall apart. Right there, in front of 200 guests. And that's when I'd be ready to grab the mic. The strange thing about rock bottom is that you don't usually realize you've hit it until something small, something dumb, makes it obvious. For me, it wasn't catching Jake in bed with my fiancée. It wasn't watching my own parents defend him like I was some overreacting child. It wasn't even hearing that he was bragging to people about giving a surprise toast at my wedding, like this whole thing was some grand sitcom finale where everything gets tied up with a bow. No, it was a week before the wedding. In the middle of a quiet Tuesday afternoon, when I walked into the bakery to surprise Claire with coffee and found her sitting on the floor in the back, head in her hands, crying. Not sobbing, not weeping, just crying. Soft, exhausted. I stood there for a second, frozen in place with 2 paper cups in my hand and a knot forming in my throat. I didn't say anything at first. I just knelt beside her and offered her the coffee. She smiled, even as her cheeks were still wet. I'm okay, she whispered. It's just been a long day. But I knew better. Claire didn't cry like that for a long day. Claire cried when something weighed on her so much that she couldn't carry it anymore without it spilling out. So I sat down beside her, ignoring the faint scent of flour and cinnamon in the air, and asked her what happened. She looked at me, eyes rimmed red, and said, I don't think your mom likes me. I blinked. What? She's been calling, she said softly. Texting, asking questions like, are you sure Derek's ready for this? Or does he talk about Hannah often? Like I'm just the rebound bride. My jaw tightened. She said she doesn't want you to make a decision you'll regret because of how much pressure you've been under, Claire went on. And I get it. I do. But it just made me feel like I'm not really welcome. I stared at the floor. My mom, the same woman who cried on the phone begging to heal the family, was now quietly undermining the one person who had helped me put myself back together. I wanted to drive to her house and scream. I wanted to call her and demand she never speak to Claire again. But instead, I sat there quiet, because something inside me finally cracked. This wasn't a family trying to heal. This was a family trying to pretend none of it happened. To replace reality with a curated version of events where Jake made a mistake, I overreacted, and everyone else just wants things to go back to normal. But there was no normal to go back to. I squeezed Claire's hand and said, you're not a rebound. You're the reason I know I never want to settle for anything less again. She smiled, faintly, and I think that helped. But later that night, when I was alone in the guest room of her apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my reflection. Not angry, not broken, just tired. That was rock bottom. It wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet, like a slow leak in your chest that you only notice once it's empty. The next morning, I sent 2 texts. One to my parents, don't contact Claire again, and one to Jake, don't show up at the wedding. No explanations. No room for debate. Then I turned my phone off for 3 days. During that time, something shifted. I stopped caring whether they understood. I stopped hoping they'd wake up one day and realize what they had done. Instead, I got to work. I took the hurt and folded it into planning. Real planning. Not the kind that makes Pinterest boards, but the kind that sets up emotional firewalls. I called the venue and arranged for private security. Not bulky bodyguards, but 2 local guys who worked at the vineyard part-time and could quietly escort anyone off the property if needed. I sent them photos of Jake. I gave them a heads up on my parents too, just in case. Claire didn't ask questions. She trusted me. That trust was what carried me through the week. In between the final fittings and floral arrangements, I started writing a speech. Not a toast. Not a thank you list. A speech. One I'd only read if Jake pulled something. It wasn't petty. It wasn't angry. It was the truth. Everything that had been hidden or swept under the rug, laid bare in front of everyone who needed to hear it. It started with the betrayal, then moved into the silence, then ended with the healing. I read it once in the mirror, just to see if I could do it without shaking. I couldn't. Not yet. But the act of writing it gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. And with control came clarity. I started going on walks again. Not to burn off anger, but just to breathe. Claire and I had dinner outside under the string lights behind her bakery. We danced in the living room, barefoot, to songs from an old record player she'd found at a garage sale. For the first time, our lives felt like they were expanding again, not just patching up holes from the past. Even my work life started to bounce back. My boss, who had given me space for months, finally reached out with a promotion. Something remote. Flexible. A role I could take after the wedding, once things had settled. I know you've had a hell of a year, he said on the phone. But I've seen the numbers. You've earned this. I hung up and stared at the email again, rereading the words senior consultant, like they were from a different person's life. And maybe they were. Because the version of me that had existed before Jake's betrayal, he would have tried to fix everything. To smooth things over. To make peace, even if it meant bleeding out quietly. But that version was gone. This new version had boundaries. This new version could look at his own reflection without flinching. Claire noticed the difference, too. You seem lighter, she said one evening as we packed wedding favors at the kitchen table. Like, you're not carrying so much. I looked at her, and for once, I didn't deflect. I'm finally learning how to let go of people who never cared if they hurt me. She nodded slowly. That's not easy. No, I said. But it's necessary. The day before the wedding, I drove out to the lake where I'd proposed. Just me. No phones. No distractions. I sat on the same blanket, watched the same ripples in the water, and I pulled out a letter I'd written to Jake. I hadn't sent it. I wasn't going to, but I needed to write it. It wasn't long. Just a page. I told him that I didn't hate him, that I no longer needed him to apologize, that I saw him for who he was now, not who I'd hoped he'd be. And I told him I forgave him. But that forgiveness didn't mean access. It didn't mean trust. It didn't mean he could rewrite the past. It just meant I wasn't going to let him own any more of my mind. Then I folded the letter and threw it into the fire pit by the lake. Watched the edges curl and burn. The flame didn't roar. It just smoldered. Quiet. Steady. Like me. That night, Claire and I slept in separate rooms, per tradition. But before we parted, she kissed my forehead and whispered, "Tomorrow, we start clean." I smiled. Because for the first time in a long, long time, I believed it. And the next day, our wedding day, the sun rose over the vineyard in a sky so clear it almost felt symbolic. The chairs were set. The guests arrived. The music played. And Claire stood at the end of the aisle in a dress so simple and stunning it took the breath right out of me. Everyone rose to their feet. Except one man. One man who stood a little too quickly. Eyes wide. Hands clenched. Face pale. And that's when I knew he was here. Jake. Uninvited. Standing among the crowd like he belonged. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have prepared for, was who he was looking at. Because as Claire stepped closer, he saw her. Truly saw her. And I watched it all unfold. The shock. The recognition. The grief. The envy. The unraveling. He turned, stepped back, knocked into a chair, then turned again like he might bolt. But he didn't. Instead, he did something much worse. He snapped. Loud enough that heads turned. Loud enough that even the music faltered. And just like that, the moment I'd been preparing for finally arrived. And that's when I stepped forward and reached for the mic. There's a very specific kind of silence that falls when someone causes a scene at a wedding. It's not like the silence in a movie theater or during a funeral. No, it's sharper, more jagged. A pause where no one breathes, like even the air is confused. That's what filled the vineyard when Jake slammed his chair backward, knocking it into the guest behind him, and hissed something that I'm pretty sure was supposed to stay in his head. "What the hell is she doing here?" He didn't yell it. Not quite. But the venom in his voice cut through the music like a blade. Claire hadn't even reached the altar yet. She was halfway down the aisle, her hand tucked into her father's arm, when Jake's words stopped her mid-step. I turned slowly, mic already in hand. Not because I was about to give a speech, but because I had asked the band for a wireless mic earlier that morning. Just in case. Just in case this exact thing happened. Because I knew Jake couldn't help himself. He was impulsive. Predictable. The kind of person who'd try to sabotage a wedding with nothing but a wounded ego and a half-finished lie in his back pocket. And as I looked at him, dressed in a suit that didn't quite fit, with that familiar flush creeping up his neck, I realized something. He hadn't changed at all. He thought he was the main character. He always did. But this time, I was the one holding the mic. I didn't speak right away. I let the silence stretch. Let the guests murmur and shift. All eyes flicked between me, Jake, and Claire, who now stood frozen halfway down the aisle, her father looking between us like he was 2 seconds away from decking someone. Jake stepped forward, fists half clenched. "You didn't tell me that she was Claire?" I said calm. "No, I didn't." He blinked. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "You did this on purpose," he said, voice rising. "You mean marrying someone I love?" "Yeah, that was intentional." Someone snorted. I don't know who. But it broke the tension just enough for me to catch Claire's eye. She nodded. A small one. Just enough. And then I turned back to Jake, ignoring the wedding guests, the camera guy, the stunned silence of my parents 3 rows back, and I said into the mic, "Let's get something clear before this day goes any further. I didn't invite you." That sparked a ripple. Heads turned. Jake tried to laugh, but it came out choked. "Come on, man. Mom said." I know what Mom said. I cut in. And I said no. He stared at me like he couldn't quite believe I'd spoken back. Like I was still supposed to be the same guy from a year ago, shocked, speechless, walking out of a bedroom with a bouquet of flowers and a broken spine. But I wasn't that guy anymore. "You were told not to come," I said, stepping toward him. "You ignored that. You thought you'd show up, steal a few moments of attention, maybe give a surprise toast like this was your redemption arc." A few guests exchanged glances. You've been lying about this day for weeks, I continued. Telling people I asked you to be my best man. Telling them we made up. Telling them you planned the proposal. I held up a hand, which, for the record, took me 6 months of saving and 2 weeks of anxiety attacks. He didn't move. You've rewritten this entire story in your head so that you're the hero. But you're not. Not here. My voice never rose. Not once. Because this wasn't rage anymore. It was control. Jake opened his mouth again, but I beat him to it. You slept with my fiancée, I said, letting the words hang in the air. You betrayed your own brother. You stood in the house I paid for, in the bed I slept in, and acted like I didn't exist. Dead quiet now. I kept quiet about it because I was ashamed, not just of you, but of how much I let you get away with before that. I turned, looking at my parents. At how many times I cleaned up your messes, paid your rent, covered for you, took the blame, got told I was too serious when I called it out. And all of you. I swept my gaze across my parents, their cheeks flushed, eyes wide. You made me believe that loving someone meant shrinking to fit their shadow. I turned back to Jake, but I'm not doing that anymore. Security was already moving from the edge of the venue. I'd hired them to blend in, matching suits, name tags, even seating assignments. Now they moved with quiet precision, flanking Jake without touching him. This isn't your day, I said. You weren't invited. And you're not welcome. Jake laughed again, sharp and bitter. All this because I messed up once. No, I said. All this because you never learned how to stop. The guard stepped forward. Don't touch me, Jake hissed. You can walk out on your own, I said. Or you can be escorted. But either way, you're done here. For a second, I thought he might punch someone. He looked like a cornered animal, angry, confused, unsure if he should lash out or play victim. In the end, he chose neither. He just turned and shoved past the guards, muttering something under his breath, and stormed off across the grass, his shoes kicking up dust as he went. I waited until he was out of sight. Then I turned back to Claire, still standing there in white, eyes shining but steady. I'm sorry, I said into the mic gently. Now, where were we? The guests laughed, nervous at first, then full. And just like that, the moment passed. But that wasn't the end. That was just the public curtain call. Behind the scenes, I had been preparing something far more intricate. Because you don't just stop someone like Jake with a single confrontation. You stop him by taking away the one thing he's always relied on, the benefit of the doubt. And for that, I needed receipts. You see, in the months leading up to the wedding, while Claire and I planned our life, I started gathering everything. Screenshots, text messages, bank transfers, witness statements from exes and coworkers, years of behavior, laid out like a trail of breadcrumbs. Not for revenge, for clarity. Because Jake had built a life on the assumption that people would forget. That if he smiled wide enough, told a good enough story, no one would ask what happened behind the curtain. But now, I had the curtain in my hands. And I was ready to pull. My first call was to Matt, my cousin, the one who'd tipped me off about the best man lie. He'd always had a good head on his shoulders, and more importantly, he worked in digital marketing. He knew how to package a message. I want to release something, I told him. Not a smear campaign. Just the truth. Matt didn't even hesitate. You have proof. Plenty. Then let's do it. Together, we built a private page. Nothing public. Nothing viral. Just a password-protected link that explained everything. The betrayal, the manipulation, the lies Jake had told about the wedding. We included quotes from old texts, notes from Claire's college days, even statements from people Jake had ghosted after scamming them out of money. Each one fact-checked. Each one time-stamped. It wasn't for everyone. Just the family. Because after the ceremony, once the photos were taken, the cake was cut, and the guests had gone home, I sent that link to my parents, aunts, uncles, and anyone who had ever asked, why can't you two just move on? And then I turned off my phone. I wasn't looking for a reaction. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for peace. And if peace meant burning down the fantasy my family had built around Jake's golden boy image, so be it. But what I didn't expect, what I couldn't have planned, was what happened next. Because someone else saw that link. Someone who wasn't supposed to. Someone who had a lot more to lose than a wedding toast or a fake reconciliation. And that was when everything truly began to unravel. Because it turns out Jake's lies had gone deeper than I thought. And one of them was about to explode. I didn't expect it to go nuclear. Not really. I thought I'd send the link, my parents would see it, maybe feel a flash of shame, maybe even realize what they'd enabled all those years. I thought there'd be quiet, some uncomfortable dinners, an apology maybe. What I didn't count on was that my cousin Matt, ever the strategist, decided to include a tracker on the link. Nothing sketchy, just the kind that tells you who opens the page and when. Within 48 hours, it had been opened 42 times. It was shared, forwarded, and one of the people who opened it, one of the very last to click the link, was someone named Krista Mallory. The name meant nothing to me at first. I almost ignored it. Until Matt called me, voice tight with tension. "Derek," he said, "you remember how Jake used to brag about his job at that investment firm in Chicago?" "Yeah," I said. "The one he was always flying to." "Supposedly." "Well, Krista Mallory," Matt said, "is not just anyone. She's his boss." That stopped me. "Wait, what?" "Yup," he said. "Senior partner. His actual boss. She was CC'd on one of the chain forwards from your Aunt Marianne." I sat down. Hard. I think she just found out that Jake's been lying. Jake had always been vague about his job. It was his MO, buzzwords and smoke. Private equity, this, early stage funding that. Every time I asked a real question, he redirected, talked about travel, about deals that were confidential, about startup bros with too much VC money and not enough common sense. I never pressed. Why would I? Everyone around him ate it up. But now someone with actual power had seen what he was really like. I didn't hear anything for a few days. And then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. "Hi, this is Krista Mallory from Compton and Row." The message said, voice clipped and professional. "I believe you're Derek. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your brother Jake." I didn't respond right away. I played the voicemail twice. Then a third time. Claire found me pacing in the backyard, phone in hand, muttering under my breath. "What's going on?" she asked. And so I told her. She just nodded, calm as ever, and said, "Call her back. If she's asking questions, she's already suspicious. You won't be telling her anything she hasn't already started to guess." So I did. Krista was polite, cold, but not unkind. She didn't ask emotional questions, just facts, dates, confirmations. "Do you know if Jake ever attended the University of Chicago MBA program?" "No," I said. "He dropped out of undergrad. Twice." A pause. "I see. And his work at the TechBridge Accelerator. Do you have any record of it?" I snorted. It was fake. He told our family he was working there when he was actually living with a girl in Portland and selling crypto consultations online. Another pause. I thought so. Turns out Jake had built an entire professional identity on paper-thin lies. Fake internships, padded resumes, degrees he never earned. He didn't just exaggerate, he fabricated. And he had somehow passed through enough cracks to land a job at a legitimate firm. One that never fully verified his background because, well, Jake was Jake. Charming, confident, a smooth talker with a decent suit and just enough buzzwords to sound legit. But in finance, that only works until it doesn't. I didn't ask what happened after our call. I didn't have to. A week later, my parents called me. Both of them. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. "Derek," my mom said, voice pinched and small. "Jake's been fired." I didn't say anything. She filled the silence like she always did. Apparently, someone at the firm got a hold of those things you sent around. That website. That wasn't meant for them, I said flatly. It was for family. "Well, they saw it," she snapped. "And now your brother has no job. No savings. Nothing. My dad took over. He's saying you set him up." I laughed. "He set himself up. I just stopped covering for him." Silence again. Then my mom said, "We were hoping you could." No, I didn't need to hear the rest. They were hoping I could help him, bail him out, offer him a place to stay, write a check, something. But I was done being his safety net. I was done playing the backup plan. I hung up. Later that week, Matt called me again. "You're not going to believe this," he said. I braced myself. "Jake's ex, the one from Portland?" She found the site too. Messaged me through the contact form. What did she say? She said she always had a feeling he was conning people. He owed her $3,000. Disappeared overnight. She's building a small claims case. By the end of the month, I'd heard from 2 more people. One was a guy who'd hired Jake for a bogus startup coaching package and never got what he paid for. The other was a woman who'd been dating Jake long distance. At the same time, he was still texting Hannah. He was unraveling. Claire and I didn't celebrate. Not openly. We just kept living. Happily. Quietly. I took the promotion. We moved into a place with a view of the mountains. Claire expanded her bakery into a second location. And I started writing again. Just small stuff. Journaling. Some essays. A piece about boundaries that a local blog ended up publishing. I never heard from Jake again. But I did get one last email from my mom. No greeting. Just a wall of text. It was angry. Bitter. She accused me of destroying the family. Of humiliating Jake. Of weaponizing the truth to make myself feel better. And then, buried in the last paragraph, was this sentence. You always had to be the good one. As if that was a bad thing. As if doing the right thing, after years of being quiet, was somehow worse than lying to everyone who ever trusted you. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because by then, the people who mattered knew the truth. Our wedding photo now hangs in the hallway. Claire, glowing in her dress. Me, smiling like I've never smiled before. Not because Jake wasn't there, but because, for the first time in my life, neither was his shadow,